The slap echoed through the gym like a gunshot. A 71-year-old man stumbled backward, his mop clattering against the floor. The handprint was already blooming red across his weathered cheek. And 23-year-old Sierra Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, watching a Marine Corps tattoo tremble on the old man's forearm as he steadied himself against the wall. She had come to Phoenix to keep a promise to a dead man. She had no idea that promise would begin with war. This is Ironclad MMA Academy, Tuesday afternoon, and everything is about to change. If you want to see what happens when a bully picks the wrong cleaning lady, subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The mop hit the floor before Walter Chen did. He caught himself against the wall, one hand pressed flat against the cold concrete, the other rising instinctively to touch his cheek. The skin was already hot. Already swelling. He could taste copper where his teeth had cut the inside of his mouth. Marcus Blackwood stood over him, 6 feet 2 inches of muscle, and contempt, his hand still raised from the blow. "What did I tell you about watching where you're going, old man?" Walter didn't answer. He had learned a long time ago that answering only made things worse. He kept his eyes down, focused on the puddle of dirty mop water spreading across the gym floor. The water that had splashed onto Marcus's pristine white sneakers. The water that had earned him this. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Walter looked up. His eyes were steady, controlled, the eyes of a man who had seen worse than this in jungles that still haunted his dreams. But his hands shook. They always shook now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. It was an accident." "An accident?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been working here 3 months and you still can't mop a floor without making a mess. What's wrong with you? Are you stupid or just useless?" The students lining the walls said nothing. They watched with the uncomfortable silence of people who knew they were witnessing something wrong, but lacked the courage to intervene. Some looked away. Others pretended to adjust their gear. One young man, barely 20, opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Walter bent slowly to pick up his mop. His knees protested. His back ached. 71 years of hard living had taken their toll, and the medication he took for nightmares made everything slower, heavier, harder. "I'll clean it up right away, sir." "You'll do more than that." Marcus stepped closer deliberately, placing his foot in the puddle, grinding dirty water into the mat. "You'll stay late tonight and clean this entire gym top to bottom. No extra pay. Consider it a lesson in paying attention." "Yes, sir. And if I ever see you embarrass me in front of my students again." Marcus leaned down until his face was inches from Walter's. "I'll make sure you never work in this city again. You understand me, I know people. One phone call and you're unemployable. A 70-year-old bum with nothing but a mop and a social security check that won't cover rent." Walter's jaw tightened. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something old. Something dangerous. The ghost of a young Marine who had killed men in rice paddies and never lost a night's sleep over it. But the ghost faded. It always did now. "I understand, Mr. Blackwood." Marcus smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just won a fight that was never fair to begin with. "Good. Now clean up this mess before the evening class arrives, and try not to screw it up again." He turned and walked toward his office, leaving Walter alone with his mop and his shame and the eyes of 30 students who had watched a 71-year-old veteran get slapped across the face and done nothing. Walter knelt slowly and began to mop. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Sierra Hayes had seen men die. She had held her swim buddy's hand as blood pumped from wounds that combat medicine couldn't fix. She had pulled triggers in rooms where the only light came from muzzle flashes. She had earned her trident in places the government would never acknowledge, doing things that would never appear in any official record. But watching a 71-year-old Marine get slapped by a gym owner made her feel something she hadn't felt since Yemen. Rage. Pure, cold, controlled rage. She stood in the doorway of ironclad MMA Academy wearing an oversized hoodie and faded jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like a college student. That was the point. Nobody looked twice at a girl who looked like she'd wandered in from a nearby campus. Nobody saw a Navy SEAL. The dog tags in her pocket felt heavy. They belonged to Jason Chen, Walter's grandson, the man who had saved her life 4 months ago in a safe house in Yemen that wasn't supposed to exist. Jason's last words still echoed in her dreams. "Find my grandfather. Tell him I forgive him. Take care of him, Ghost. Promise me." She had promised, and Sierra Hayes kept her promises. She watched Walter kneel to clean up the water, watched his hands tremble, watched the red mark on his cheek slowly darken into a bruise. She saw the Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. The eagle globe and anchor. Faded now, the ink turned pale blue-green from decades of sun and hard living, but unmistakable. A Force Recon Marine reduced to being slapped by a gym owner with an ego problem. Sierra's fingers curled into fists at her sides. She started walking. The young man who had almost spoken up noticed her first. He was maybe 20, lean and nervous, with the kind of posture that suggested military background despite his youth. He watched the small woman in the hoodie cross the gym floor with deliberate steps, heading straight for the old janitor. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, miss, you probably shouldn't." Sierra ignored him. She stopped beside Walter and knelt down, placing herself at his level. He flinched when he saw her, the automatic reaction of a man who expected every approach to bring more pain. "Sir," she said quietly, "are you all right?" Walter stared at her. His eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Marines didn't cry, not where people could see. "I'm fine, miss. Just doing my job." "He hit you." "It was my fault. I wasn't watching where I was going." "No, sir." Sierra's voice was gentle but firm. "It was assault, and it wasn't your fault." Walter shook his head slowly. "Miss, I appreciate the concern, but you should go. You don't want to get involved in this. Mr. Blackwood, he's not a man you want to cross. I've crossed worse men than him." Something in her tone made Walter look at her more carefully. Really look. He saw a young woman, maybe 23, small and unassuming. But her eyes didn't match the rest of her. They were old. Steady. The eyes of someone who had seen things that aged the soul faster than years aged the body. "Who are you?" he asked. Before Sierra could answer, a voice cut across the gym. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus Blackwood had emerged from his office. He walked toward them with the swagger of a man who owned every room he entered, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The old janitor, the young woman in civilian clothes, the students watching with renewed interest. "I asked a question," Marcus said. "Who are you? And what are you doing in my gym?" Sierra stood slowly and turned to face him. She was 5'4", 125 pounds. She looked like she should be studying for finals, not standing in an MMA academy. "Your employee needs medical attention," she said calmly. "You should call someone." Marcus laughed. "Medical attention for what?" He tripped and bumped his face. It happens. That's not what I saw. The gym went quiet. Even the students who had been pretending not to pay attention were openly watching now. Marcus took a step closer to Sierra, then another. He was over a foot taller than her, nearly 100 pounds heavier. His shadow fell across her like a threat. "What exactly did you see?" he asked softly. "I saw a grown man slap a 71-year-old veteran across the face because some mop water got on his shoes." Sierra's voice didn't waver. "I saw assault, and I saw cowardice." The word landed like a physical blow. Marcus's face flushed. A vein became visible at his temple. His hands clenched into fists. "You want to repeat that cowardice?" Sierra said. "Would you like me to spell it?" One of the students made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh quickly suppressed. Marcus smiled. It was the kind of smile that preceded violence. "You've got a mouth on you, cleaning girl. Let me guess you came here looking for a job. Think you can work the mop better than Grandpa here? I didn't come here for a job." "Then why are you here?" "I came to check on someone." Sierra glanced at Walter, then back at Marcus. "Someone who deserves better than this." "Better than what? A paycheck, a place to be? I gave this useless old man a job when nobody else would hire him. I'm practically a charity." "Charity doesn't include assault." "It wasn't assault. It was discipline." "There's a word for people who discipline others with their fists," Sierra said. "Would you like me to tell you what it is?" Marcus leaned down until his face was inches from hers. She could smell his cologne, his sweat, his rage. "You've got about 5 seconds to walk out that door," he said quietly, "before I show you what discipline really looks like." Sierra held his gaze without blinking. "Touch me," she said, "and I'll put you on the floor." The silence that followed was absolute. The young man who had almost spoken up earlier stepped forward. His name was Derek Reyes, and he had served 2 years as an army medic before a training accident left him with a TBI that ended his career. He knew what he was seeing. He recognized the calm in this young woman's eyes, the way she stood balanced on the balls of her feet, the absence of fear in the face of a man who could crush her. "Ma'am," he said urgently, "please, just walk away. He hospitalizes people. He enjoys it." Sierra didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus. "Does he? I'm serious. Last month he broke a guy's arm in sparring. Said it was an accident, but everyone knows—" "Shut up, Derek." Marcus didn't take his eyes off Sierra. "Unless you want to be next." Derek fell silent, but he didn't move away. He stayed close, watching his hands trembling slightly with the adrenaline of a man who wanted to help, but didn't know how. Marcus smiled at Sierra. 5 seconds are up, cleaning girl." He reached for her. His hand never made contact. Sierra moved. One moment she was standing still. The next she had stepped inside his reach, redirected his arm, and applied pressure to his wrist that sent him stumbling sideways with a grunt of surprise and pain. She released him immediately and stepped back. "Don't touch me," she said. "I won't warn you again." Marcus stared at her. His wrist throbbed where she had controlled it. The grip had been like iron, like cable, like something that didn't belong in a body that small. What the hell was that? That was a warning. The students were murmuring now. Phones were coming out. Someone in the back was already recording. Marcus straightened slowly, rolling his wrist, testing the joint. It worked, but it ached. He looked at Sierra with new eyes, eyes that were recalculating, reassessing. "You've had some training," he said. "Some. We're cardio kickboxing at the Y self-defense class at the community center, here and there." Marcus smiled again. This time it was different, hungrier, the smile of a predator who had found something worth hunting. "All right, cleaning girl. You want to play? Let's play." He raised his voice so the whole gym could hear. "Tomorrow night, 6 p.m., right here on this mat. You and me. MMA rules. First tap ends it." The murmurs intensified. Someone let out a low whistle. "Unless you're scared," Marcus added. "No shame in backing down. You can walk out right now and we'll forget this whole thing happened." Sierra looked at Walter. The old man was shaking his head, his eyes wide with fear. Not for himself, for her. "Miss," he said urgently, "please don't do this. I'm not worth it." "Yes, sir," Sierra said quietly. "You are." She turned back to Marcus. "One condition." "Name it." "When I win, you apologize to Mr. Chen. Publicly, in front of everyone, and you never lay a hand on him again." Marcus's smile widened. "When you win, honey, you're maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. I've got nearly 100 pounds on you. I've been training since before you were born." "Is that a yes?" "It's a hell yes." Marcus spread his arms wide, addressing the crowd. "You all hear that tomorrow at 6, this little cleaning girl thinks she can beat me. Anyone who wants to watch the lesson should show up early. It's going to be a good one." A few students cheered. Others looked uncomfortable. Derek Reyes just stared at Sierra with an expression that was half horror, half something else. Something that might have been recognition. 6 p.m., Sierra said. "I'll be here. I'm counting on it." She started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Walter. "Mr. Chen, can I speak with you privately? There's something I need to tell you." Walter looked at her, then at Marcus, then back at her. His hands were still shaking, but there was something new in his eyes now. Confusion. Curiosity. The faintest spark of something that might have been hope. I have to finish cleaning." "It can wait," Sierra's voice was gentle. "This is more important." Marcus snorted. "Go ahead, old man. Take your break. Lord knows you need the rest." Walter hesitated for a long moment. Then slowly, he set down his mop. "All right, miss. I'll give you 5 minutes." "That's all I need." They walked out the back door into the alley behind the gym. The afternoon sun was harsh, casting sharp shadows across the concrete. A dumpster sat against the far wall, surrounded by the detritus of urban life. It wasn't a place for important conversations, but it was private. That was all that mattered. Walter leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. Up close, Sierra could see the full extent of the damage. The bruise was darkening, spreading across his cheekbone. His lip was swollen where he had bitten it, but his eyes were clear. Alert. The eyes of a man who had survived worse than a slap. "All right, miss. What's this about?" Sierra reached into her pocket and pulled out the dog tags. She held them out to Walter without speaking. For a moment, he just looked at them. Then his face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. His breath caught in his throat. His hands, which had been shaking since the slap, went completely still. "Where did you get those?" His voice was barely a whisper. "They belong to your grandson," Sierra said. "Jason Chen, Petty Officer 2nd Class, Navy SEAL." Belonged. The past tense hit him like a second slap, harder than the first. He reached for the tags with trembling fingers, turned them over, read the stamped letters that spelled out his grandson's name. "No," he said. "No, that's not possible. Jason is deployed. He's overseas. He's—" "Mr. Chen." Sierra's voice was soft. Careful. "Jason was killed in action 4 months ago. Yemen. I was there. I was with him when he died." Walter's knees buckled. Sierra caught him before he hit the ground, easing him down against the wall. He sat there in the dust, and the shadow clutching his grandson's dog tags to his chest. his whole body shaking. "No," he said again. "No, no, no. I've been writing him letters. I've been waiting for him to call. I've been—" "I know, sir. I know." 4 months. Walter looked up at her, his eyes wet, his voice cracking. "He's been dead for 4 months and nobody told me. The notification went to his ex-wife, your daughter. You weren't listed as next of kin." Sierra knelt beside him. "The system failed you, sir. I'm so sorry." "My daughter—" Walter laughed, but it was a broken sound. "She hasn't spoken to me in 20 years, since her mother— since I—" He couldn't finish. His hand pressed flat against his chest where his heart was trying to beat its way out of his rib cage. "How?" he finally asked. "How did he die?" Sierra was quiet for a moment. She had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head, but no amount of preparation made it easier. "We were conducting a raid on a suspected insurgent safe house. Jason identified a threat that I missed, an enemy combatant in a concealed position about to fire on our team." She paused. "He stepped into the line of fire to protect us. Took 3 rounds to the chest and abdomen. Our medic did everything possible, but the wounds were too severe." Walter closed his eyes. A tear escaped and traced a line down his weathered cheek. "Did he suffer?" "Yes, sir. But not for long, maybe 3 minutes from the first shot to the end. He was conscious. He knew what was happening." "Did he say anything?" This was the moment. The words that would either save this man or destroy him. "He asked me to find you," Sierra said. "To tell you that he loved you. That he understood why you fought, why you pushed him away. That he forgave you for everything." Walter's breath caught. "He said you were his hero," Sierra continued. "That he joined the Marines because of your stories. That he wanted to make you proud." "I was never—" Walter's voice broke completely. "I was never proud enough. I pushed him away. I told him the military would use him up and throw him away. The last time we talked, I said terrible things. I said—" "He knew it came from love, sir. He told me. He said his father was scared because he'd seen what war did to people. He understood." Walter looked at the dog tags in his hand. His grandson's name. His grandson's blood type. His grandson's last possession. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you come here? Why did you find me?" "Because Jason asked me to." Sierra met his eyes. "He saved my life, Mr. Chen. The rounds that killed him were meant for me. He stepped into that fire so I could live. And his last words, his very last breath, he used it to ask me to take care of you." She paused. "I made him a promise, sir, and I keep my promises." They sat in silence for a long time. The sounds of the gym filtered through the walls. Music. Shouting. The thud of bodies hitting mats. The world going on as if nothing had changed. As if a 71-year-old man hadn't just learned that his grandson was dead and buried and gone forever. Finally, Walter spoke. "You shouldn't fight him tomorrow." "Sir, Marcus Blackwood is dangerous. He's hurt people. Badly. And you're a what, sir?" Walter looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time he saw past the oversized hoodie and the messy ponytail and the young face. He saw the way she held herself, the calm in her eyes, the absolute absence of fear. "Who are you?" he asked. "Really? Lieutenant Sierra Hayes, Navy SEAL. I was Jason's swim buddy during training. We went through Hell Week in the same boat crew." She paused. "I was with him on his last mission. I was the one he saved." Walter stared at her. "You're a SEAL." "Yes, sir." "But you're just a girl." Sierra smiled slightly. "I get that a lot. And tomorrow you're going to fight a man twice your size because he slapped me." I'm going to fight him because he needs to learn that strength isn't about dominance. It's about protection. Sierra stood and offered her hand. And because I made a promise to your grandson that I would take care of you. That means not letting anyone hurt you. Not ever again. Walter took her hand and let her help him up. He was still shaking, still reeling from the news, still trying to process a grief that was 4 months old and brand new all at once. But something else was there too. Something that felt almost like hope. "Miss Hayes," he said quietly. "Thank you for telling me, for keeping your promise, for being there when my grandson needed someone." "I wish I'd been faster, sir." "So do I." Walter's voice hardened slightly. "But you weren't. And Jason made his choice. Don't dishonor his memory by pretending you had control over what he decided to do." Sierra nodded slowly. The door behind them opened. Derek Reyes stood there, his face pale. "Ma'am," he said urgently, "I don't know if you know what you're getting into tomorrow, but you need to understand something. Marcus Blackwood doesn't just fight to win. He fights to destroy. Last year, a guy challenged him to a sparring match, and Marcus beat him so badly he spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Broken orbital bone, collapsed lung. Marcus called it an accident, but everyone knows the truth. Thank you for the warning, Derek. You're really going through with this." Sierra looked at Walter, at the bruise darkening on his cheek, at the dog tags clutched in his trembling hands. "Yes," she said, "I am." Derek shook his head. "Then God help you, ma'am, because Marcus Blackwood won't." He went back inside. Walter and Sierra stood alone in the alley, the setting sun casting long shadows across the concrete. "I should get back to work," Walter said quietly. "Marcus will fire me if I take too long." "You don't have to go back there, sir. I can help you find another job." "I'm not a charity case, Miss Hayes." "No, sir. You're a Marine, and Marines help each other. That's not charity. That's family." Walter was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Jason was lucky to have you as a teammate." "I was lucky to have him, sir. Be careful tomorrow. Please. I've already lost him. I can't." He couldn't finish. Sierra covered his hand with her own. "I'll be fine, Mr. Chen, I promise." "Another promise?" "Yes, sir, another promise." Walter nodded slowly. He slipped Jason's dog tags into his pocket, touching them once more before letting them go. Then he turned and walked back into the gym, and Sierra Hayes watched him go. Her hands steady, her heart full of rage and grief, and the cold, clear certainty that tomorrow she would keep her promise, no matter what it cost. The hotel room was cheap and small, and exactly what Sierra needed. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. The contact name read Hawk. Colonel Diana Reese, her commanding officer, her mentor. The woman who had pulled her out of foster care at 18 and shown her that strength wasn't about surviving pain. It was about transforming it. Sierra hit the call button. 2 rings. Then the familiar voice, rough from decades of cigarettes she'd quit, but never stopped missing. "Ghost, didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I found him, Colonel. Walter Chen, Jason's grandfather." Silence on the other end. Then carefully. "And he didn't know about Jason." The notification went to his ex-wife. "Walter's been writing letters for 4 months to a grandson who's already in the ground." "Jesus! I told him! Today! Watched his whole world fall apart in a dirty alley behind an MMA gym." "How'd he take it?" Sierra closed her eyes. She could still see Walter's face. The way the color had drained from his cheeks. The way his hands had stopped shaking for the first time all day because his whole body had gone rigid with shock. Like a Marine, she said. Controlled, until he wasn't. And you, how are you taking it? Sierra didn't answer right away. The question cut deeper than Diana probably intended. I picked a fight, she finally said. What kind of fight? The gym owner. Big guy MMA background. He slapped Walter across the face right in front of me. Called him useless. Treated him like garbage. And you stepped in. I had to. No, Ghost. You didn't have to. You chose to. Diana's voice softened slightly. What are you really doing out there? Are you keeping a promise? Or are you punishing yourself for surviving? The question hung in the air like smoke. Both, Sierra admitted. Maybe both. Pain isn't penance, Ghost. You know that. I know what I know. Doesn't change what I feel. Diana was quiet for a moment. When's this fight happening? Tomorrow, 6 p.m. You need backup. For a gym rat with an ego problem, I think I can handle it. That's not what I asked. I asked if you need backup. Someone in your corner. A friendly face. Sierra felt something tighten in her chest. After everything she'd been through, after all the missions and the losses and the nights spent wondering why she was still alive when better people weren't. Diana Reese was still there. Still checking in. Still refusing to let her carry everything alone. I wouldn't say no to company, Colonel. I'll be there at 17:30. Try not to start any more fights before I arrive. No promises. Never are with you, Ghost. Never are. The call ended. Sierra set the phone down and pulled Jason's patrol cap from her bag. She'd taken it from his locker after the memorial. Nobody had stopped her. Nobody had even noticed. They were too busy with flags and speeches and the hollow rituals that the military used to process death. She pressed the cap to her face and breathed in. It still smelled like him, sweat and gun oil and the cheap cologne he'd worn since basic training. The smell of her brother, her partner, the man who had pushed her through Hell Week when every fiber of her being screamed to quit. I found him, Jason, she whispered. Your grandfather. He's broken, but he's still standing, just like you said he'd be. The cap offered no response. It never did. Sierra set it down carefully and lay back on the bed. The ceiling had water stains that formed abstract patterns, years of slow leaks that nobody had bothered to fix. She traced them with her eyes and let herself remember. Hell Week, Day 3. The coldest night of Sierra's life. The Pacific Ocean was 47 degrees, and the instructors had kept them in the water for 3 hours straight. Hypothermia was setting in. Men were dropping out every few minutes, ringing the bell that meant surrender, walking away from their dreams, because their bodies had finally overruled their minds. Sierra couldn't feel her legs anymore, couldn't feel her hands, could barely keep her head above water. Hayes. Jason's voice cut through the fog in her brain. Hayes, look at me. She turned her head. He was right beside her, treading water with the same mechanical desperation she felt. I can't, she gasped. I can't do this anymore. Yes, you can. My legs are gone. I can't feel anything. Then stop feeling. Start thinking. His hand found her arm under the water, gripping tight. You're not dying tonight, Hayes. Neither am I. We're going to make it through this together. You hear me? I can't. Stop saying that. You can. You will. His eyes locked onto hers. I'm not letting you quit. Not tonight. Not ever. So move your legs and stay with me. She moved her legs. She didn't know how. Didn't know where the strength came from. But she moved. They made it through that night together, and every night after. Through surf torture, and log PT, and runs in the sand that never seemed to end. Through injuries and setbacks and moments when giving up seemed like the only sane option. Jason never let her quit, and she never let him. until Yemen. Until the moment he stepped into that line of fire, and she couldn't stop him. Couldn't save him. Could only hold his hand while his life pumped out onto a concrete floor in a country that wasn't supposed to exist. "Promise me, Ghost," he'd whispered. "Take care of my old man. He's alone now. Promise me." "I promise." And then he was gone. Sierra opened her eyes. The ceiling was still there. The water stains hadn't moved. She sat up slowly and reached for her phone again. This time she pulled up photos. Images from training. From deployments. From the rare moments of peace between missions. One photo stopped her cold. Jason and Walter. A family reunion from 3 years ago. Jason had shown it to her, once proud and happy, talking about how he'd finally reconnected with his grandfather after years of estrangement. "He's stubborn as hell," Jason had said. "Just like me. We fight about everything. But he's the only family I've got left who actually feels like family, you know." Sierra studied Walter's face in the photo. He was smiling. Actually smiling. His arm was around Jason's shoulders, and there was pride in his eyes. Real pride. The kind that fathers show for sons who've made them believe that everything was worth it. That man wasn't smiling anymore. That man had been slapped across the face by a gym owner with an ego problem, while his grandson's body lay in Arlington National Cemetery decorated with medals he'd never get to see. Sierra put the phone down. Tomorrow she would show Marcus Blackwood what happened when you hurt people who couldn't fight back. Tomorrow, she would keep her promise. Across the city, Walter Chen sat alone in his studio apartment, holding 47 unsent letters in his trembling hands. He'd read them all, every single one. Pages and pages of apologies that would never be heard. Explanations that would never be understood. A father's regret poured out in ink that Jason would never see. "Dear Jason," the first one began. "I know I said terrible things the last time we talked. I know I pushed you away. But I need you to understand that I was scared. Not angry, scared. Because I've seen what war does to men. I've lived it. And I couldn't bear the thought of watching it happen to you." The last letter was dated 3 weeks ago. "Dear Jason, I got a job at a gym downtown. The owner isn't kind, but the work pays rent. I think about you every day. I hope you're safe. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Love, Dad." Dad. He'd signed them all Dad, even though he was technically Jason's grandfather. But Jason's father had died when Jason was 6, and Walter had stepped in, had tried to fill that void, even though his own demons made him terrible at it. Dad. The word felt like broken glass in his throat. He set the letters down and looked at the dog tags Sierra had given him. Jason's name. Jason's blood type. Jason's religion. All the information the military needed to identify a body. To process a death. To turn a living, breathing human being into a statistic. "I'm sorry," Walter whispered. "I'm so sorry." He didn't know who he was apologizing to. Jason. Himself. God, if there was one. His medication bottles sat on the table beside him. PTSD pills, anxiety pills, sleep aids for nightmares that 50 years hadn't been enough to erase. He reached for them, then stopped. Something Sierra had said kept echoing in his mind. "He asked me to find you, to tell you that he loved you, that he forgave you for everything." Forgiveness. Walter had been waiting for that word for years, had been writing letters begging for it, had been lying awake at night wondering if he'd ever hear it. And now he had. From a young woman who'd held his grandson's hand while he died. A Navy SEAL who looked like a college student but moved like a weapon. A stranger who'd walked into a gym and challenged a bully twice her size because she'd promised a dying man she'd protect his grandfather. Walter looked at the dog tags again. "You always did know how to pick your friend's son," he said quietly. "Even at the end." He put the letters away, took his medication, lay down on the Murphy bed with its military corners, and stared at the ceiling until the pills dragged him down into something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite waking either. Tomorrow, he would go back to the gym. Tomorrow, he would watch a 23-year-old woman fight for his honor. And for the first time in 4 months, Walter Chen wasn't sure if he should pray for her victory or beg her to run. Marcus Blackwood couldn't sleep either. He sat in his home gym replaying the moment when that woman had redirected his grab like it was nothing. Like he was nothing. The way she'd applied pressure to his wrist, controlled and precise, making him stumble like a white belt who'd never trained a day in his life. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered to the empty room. He pulled out his phone and started searching. Sierra Hayes. Nothing specific. No social media, no competition records, no gym affiliations. It was like she didn't exist. He tried different search terms. Female MMA fighters, self-defense instructors, military combative specialists. Nothing matched the woman he'd seen. Nothing explained how someone that small could move with that kind of confidence. His sister's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Still obsessing?" Nicole stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She was 32, a nurse at the VA hospital, and she'd spent her entire adult life watching her brother become someone she didn't recognize. "I'm not obsessing. I'm researching. For 3 hours, Derek, it's almost midnight. It's Marcus. It's Derek. That's what Mom named you. That's who you were before you decided Derek wasn't tough enough." He turned to face her. "What do you want, Nicole?" "I want to understand why you slapped a 70-year-old man today. I want to understand why you're picking fights with women half your size. I want to understand what happened to my brother." "Nothing happened. Dad would be ashamed of you." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "Don't," Marcus warned. "Don't bring him into this. Why not everything you do is about him? The gym, the trophies, the constant need to prove you're the toughest person in every room." Nicole stepped closer. "Dad was a firefighter, Derek. He saved lives. He protected people. And you? You slap old men and bully your students and call it discipline. I'm building something here. You're destroying something here, including yourself." Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You don't understand. You've never understood. Dad died being a hero. Everyone knows his story. The 3 bullets, the partner he saved, the funeral with the flags and the speeches. And what did I do? I opened a gym. I teach people how to choke each other out. That could be meaningful work, if you did it with honor." "Honor," Marcus laughed bitterly. "Honor doesn't pay the bills. Honor doesn't fill the seats. People don't come to my gym because I'm honorable. They come because I'm dangerous, because they know I can back up every word. And tomorrow when you fight this woman, what are you going to prove? That what happened today was a fluke, that she got lucky with one move. What if she didn't?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "She did," he finally said. "She had to." Nicole shook her head slowly. "That old man, the janitor, do you even know his name? Walter something?" "Walter Chen. He's a Marine Corps veteran. Force Recon. 3 tours in Vietnam. He served this country while you were still in diapers and you slapped him across the face because some water got on your shoes." "How do you know all that?" "Because I actually talk to people, Derek. Because I see them as human beings, not just obstacles or employees or targets." She turned to leave, then stopped at the doorway. That woman who challenged you. I watched the video someone posted online. The way she moved. The way she stayed calm when you got in her face. Nicole met his eyes. She wasn't scared of you. Not even a little. And that should terrify you more than anything else. She left. Marcus stood alone in his home gym, surrounded by equipment that suddenly felt meaningless. Trophies that represented victories in competitions that didn't matter. Photos of himself posing with championship belts that his father had never lived to see. His phone buzzed. Instagram notification. His post about tomorrow's fight had gone viral. Thousands of comments, hundreds of shares. Everyone wanted to see the cleaning girl get taught a lesson. Everyone was counting on him to deliver. He couldn't back down now. Couldn't show weakness. Couldn't admit that something about Sierra Hayes made his gut tighten with a fear he didn't understand. Tomorrow, he would prove himself. Tomorrow, he would show everyone that Marcus Blackwood was exactly who he claimed to be. And if a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life, he ignored it. He was good at ignoring voices. Dawn came slowly to Phoenix. Sierra was awake before the sun running through empty streets, with the kind of desperate energy that came from trying to outpace thoughts she couldn't escape. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed, and her mind finally went quiet. By 7 a.m., she was showered and dressed, sitting in a coffee shop 2 blocks from Ironclad MMA, watching the entrance through the window. Students arrived throughout the morning. Young men mostly, confident in that particular way that came from training with someone who'd convinced them that violence was the highest form of expression. Derek Reyes arrived at 9. He paused at the entrance, looked around as if searching for something, then went inside. At 10, Marcus pulled up in his BMW. He got out slowly, rolling his shoulders, cracking his neck, playing the part of the champion preparing for battle. And at 10:30, Walter Chen shuffled into view. He looked worse than yesterday. Older, more fragile, the bruise on his cheek had darkened to purple, and he walked with the careful steps of a man who expected the ground to give way beneath him at any moment. He paused at the entrance, staring at the door like it was an enemy he wasn't sure he could face. Then he squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and walked inside. Something in Sierra's chest twisted. That was Marine Corps training. 50 years old and still holding. The instinct to face forward even when everything inside you was screaming to run. She finished her coffee, left exact change on the table, and crossed the street. It was time. The back entrance led to a hallway lined with lockers and storage rooms. Sierra found Walter in the maintenance closet gathering his supplies with hands that still trembled. "Mr. Chen." He turned startled. Then his face softened with something that might have been relief. "Miss Hayes, you shouldn't be here. Not until tonight. I needed to see you, to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like you haven't slept in days." Walter set down his mop and leaned against the wall. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then quietly, "I read all the letters last night. 47 of them. Every word I wrote to a boy who was already dead. Mr. Chen, he died thinking I was angry at him. He died believing our last conversation was a fight about whether the military was worth his life. That's not true. He knew you loved him. How could he know that I spent so many years pushing him away, telling him he was making mistakes, that the government would use him up and throw him away? I said terrible things. And he understood why. He told me himself." Sierra moved closer. "He said his grandfather was scared because he'd seen what war did to people. He said it came from love, even if it sounded like anger." Walter's eyes were wet. I served 3 tours in Vietnam. I watched friends die in jungles that the politicians back home couldn't even find on a map. And when I came back, I was broken. My marriage fell apart. My daughter stopped speaking to me. I spent years trying to drink away memories that wouldn't stay buried. You survived. Barely. And I didn't want that for Jason. I didn't want him to end up like me, alone, haunted, waking up at night in a cold sweat, reaching for a weapon that isn't there. He didn't end up like that. No. Walter's voice cracked. He ended up dead, 28 years old, buried in a cemetery I didn't even know about until yesterday. Sierra reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. He died saving lives, Mr. Chen. He died being exactly the kind of man you raised him to be. Not broken, not haunted, brave, honorable. The kind of warrior who steps into fire so others don't have to. Walter looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached up and covered her hand with his own. Tonight, he said quietly, when you fight Marcus, be careful. Please, I've already lost Jason. I can't. He couldn't finish. I'll be careful, sir. I promise. Another promise? Yes, sir. Another promise. Walter nodded slowly. He picked up his mop and bucket, preparing to return to work that would grind him down while a man who'd slapped him counted the hours until he could prove his dominance again. Miss Hayes, he said at the door. Thank you for coming here, for telling me about Jason, for standing up when no one else would. Thank you, sir. For what? For raising the man who saved my life. Walter's breath caught. He nodded once, unable to speak, and walked out into the hallway. Sierra watched him go. 6 hours until the fight. 6 hours until she kept her promise. And somewhere in the gym above her, Marcus Blackwood was training for a battle he thought he understood against an opponent he couldn't begin to imagine. The gym was packed by 5:30. Word had spread through every MMA community in Phoenix. Social media had done the rest. Marcus Blackwood's post had been shared thousands of times, and now over 100 people crammed into a space designed for 40 lining the walls, sitting on equipment phones already out and recording. They wanted blood. They wanted to watch a man twice her size teach a woman her place. They had no idea what they were about to witness. Colonel Diana Reese arrived at exactly 17:30, just as she'd promised. She moved through the crowd without drawing attention, her silver-gray hair pulled back tight. Her pale blue eyes scanning the room with the tactical awareness of someone who'd spent 32 years in special operations. She found a spot against the back wall where she could see everything and be seen by no one. Sierra noticed her immediately. Their eyes met across the room. Diana gave her a single nod. You've got this, Ghost. Walter stood near the maintenance closet, still wearing his work uniform, his hands clasped in front of him so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The bruise on his cheek was darker now, almost black in places, a permanent reminder of why they were all here. Derek Reyes positioned himself near the front of the crowd, close enough to intervene if things went wrong. He'd served 2 years as an army medic. He knew what injuries looked like, knew how fast a controlled sparring session could become something else entirely. And Marcus Blackwood stood in the center of the mat, bouncing on his toes, throwing sharp combinations into the air. He'd changed into fight shorts and a compression shirt that showed off every muscle he'd spent a decade building. His hands were wrapped. His mouthguard was in. His eyes were hungry. "Where's the cleaning girl?" he shouted to the crowd. "Did she finally come to her senses?" Laughter rippled through his supporters. "Maybe she ran home to cry." More laughter. "Can't blame her. Smart women know their limits." The door to the women's changing room opened. Sierra walked out. She wore compression shorts and a fitted athletic top. Her hands were wrapped. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. She looked small, young, completely out of place. But her eyes told a different story. The laughter died. Something about the way she moved silenced the crowd. Something about the absolute calm in her expression. She crossed the mat with measured steps, stopping 10 feet from Marcus, and waited. "You actually showed up," Marcus said. "I'm impressed. Stupid, but impressed. Are we going to fight, or are you going to talk all night?" His jaw tightened. Tough words for someone who's about to get hospitalized. "I've been threatened by better men than you. They're all dead now." The crowd murmured. That wasn't a boast. That was a statement of fact delivered with the casual certainty of someone discussing the weather. Nicole Blackwood stepped forward. She'd agreed to referee despite her brother's objections, insisting that someone needed to make sure things didn't go too far. She looked at Sierra with an expression that mixed concern with something that might have been hope. "MMA rules," Nicole announced. "No strikes to the back of the head, no eye gouging, no fish hooking, no strikes to the groin. First tap ends it." She paused. "Both fighters understand." Marcus nodded, still bouncing. Sierra simply raised one hand in acknowledgement. "Touch gloves." Marcus didn't wait. He exploded forward the moment Nicole's hand dropped, closing the distance with a blitzing combination designed to end the fight before it began. Right cross, left hook, overhand right. Each punch thrown with knockout power aimed at the head of a woman who should have been too slow to react. Sierra wasn't there. She slipped the first punch by millimeters, pivoted inside the second, caught the third on her forearm while simultaneously checking Marcus's lead leg with a low kick that made him stumble. The combination had taken less than 2 seconds. Marcus had missed everything. "What the hell?" He reset, circling now, more cautious. The crowd was silent. They'd expected dominance. They'd expected their champion to overwhelm this woman in the first 10 seconds. Instead, she was still standing, still calm, still waiting. "Lucky," Marcus muttered. "Got lucky." He came again this time with a level change. Double leg takedown. Wrestling had always been his strength. If he could get her to the ground, his weight advantage would end this quickly. Sierra sprawled. Her hips shot back. Her weight dropped onto his shoulders. And suddenly Marcus was carrying 125 pounds of dead weight while trying to complete a takedown that required mobility he no longer had. He strained, pushed, tried to power through. Sierra moved. Her right arm slipped under his armpit. Her left wrapped around his back. Her body shifted with fluid precision, and Marcus felt his entire world tilt as she spun to his back. The crowd gasped. Sierra's legs wrapped around his torso in a body triangle, one calf locked behind the opposite knee, creating a vice of pressure that compressed his ribcage and made breathing difficult. Her right arm snaked around his neck. Not a choke, not yet, just establishing position. "Tap," she said quietly. Marcus didn't tap. He couldn't. Not in front of everyone, not after everything he'd said. He tried to peel her legs apart. Couldn't. Tried to turn into her. Couldn't. Tried to buck her off. Couldn't. Her body felt like it was made of cables and concrete. Every point of contact was a source of pressure that made his options narrower with each passing second. 10 seconds. 15. 20. His face was turning red. His breathing was labored. The edges of his vision were starting to blur. He tapped. 3 quick strikes against her forearm. Sierra released him instantly. She stepped back and extended her hand to help him up. Marcus ignored the hand. He rolled to his knees, gasping, his face flushed with exertion and humiliation. The gym was absolutely silent. Phones were still recording, capturing every moment of their instructor being dominated by a woman they'd been laughing at 60 seconds ago. "Get up," Sierra said. Marcus pushed himself to his feet. His legs were unsteady. His lungs burned. Something in his expression had changed. Not defeat. Not yet. But the first crack in his certainty. "How?" he demanded. "Where did you learn that here and there? Military bases, mostly." "Military?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "What, your Army Air Force? You push papers at some desk job and think that makes you tough." "Navy." "Navy." Another laugh. "So you filed paperwork on ships? That's adorable." Derek Reyes shifted uncomfortably in the crowd. He'd recognized something in the way Sierra moved, something that didn't belong in a gym, something that came from training designed to kill, not compete. "We're not done," Marcus said. "That was round 1. Let's go again." "Your call." They reset. Marcus was more careful this time, circling, keeping his distance, trying to figure out the puzzle of a woman who shouldn't be able to do what she'd just done. He threw a jab. She parried it. He threw a leg kick. She checked it. He threw a combination. She slipped everything and countered with a straight right that snapped his head back and made stars explode behind his eyes. First strike she'd thrown all night. It landed clean. Marcus stumbled backward, touching his lip. His fingers came away bloody. "You hit me," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "I'm going to hit you again." She came forward, no longer content to wait and counter. She pressed him, throwing combinations that were economical and precise. Nothing wasted. Nothing flashy. Every shot designed to create an opening or cause damage. Marcus covered up, trying to weather the storm, looking for an opening to grab her, to use his wrestling to get this fight to the ground, where his weight might matter. He reached for a clinch. Sierra ducked under his arms, pivoted behind him, and threw a kick to the back of his leg that dropped him to one knee. Before he could recover, she was on his back again. This time she didn't establish position. This time she went straight for the choke. Her right arm wrapped around his throat. Her left hand gripped her right bicep. Her head pressed against the back of his skull, completing the structure. Rear naked choke. Textbook perfect. Marcus had approximately 4 seconds before unconsciousness. He tapped immediately. Sierra released him. Stepped back. Waited. The crowd was buzzing now. Confused, excited, terrified. This wasn't what they'd come to see. This wasn't a lesson being taught to an uppity woman. This was a demolition. Marcus stayed on his hands and knees, breathing hard, blood dripping from his lip onto the mat. "Get up," Sierra said again. "Who are you?" His voice was raw, broken. "Who the hell are you?" Derek Reyes stepped forward from the crowd. He couldn't stay silent anymore. "She's a Navy SEAL, sir." The words cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone froze. "Her name is Sierra Hayes," Derek continued. "Petty Officer 2nd Class, SEAL Team 3. She's the youngest woman to ever complete BUDS training. Her combat deployments are classified, but the rumors say she's got more confirmed kills than half this room combined." Marcus stared at Sierra from his knees. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're a SEAL." "Yes." "But you're a woman, small, young." Sierra's voice was level. "You made a lot of assumptions about me, Marcus, based on what I look like, what you thought I was capable of. You did the same thing to Mr. Chen. Assumed he was weak because he's old. Assumed he was worthless because he cleans floors for a living." She stepped closer. "That man served 3 tours in Vietnam. Force Recon Marine. He was killing enemies in jungles while you were still learning to walk. And you slapped him across the face because some mop water got on your shoes." The crowd was absolutely silent. "His grandson was Jason Chen, Navy SEAL, my swim buddy, my brother in arms. Sierra's voice cracked slightly. He died 4 months ago, saving my life. Took 3 rounds that were meant for me because that's what warriors do. They protect people. They sacrifice for people. They don't humiliate them. Marcus's face had gone pale. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't ask. You never do. You're so busy proving you're the toughest person in the room that you never stop to wonder if anyone else might be carrying weight you can't imagine. She extended her hand again. This time Marcus took it. She pulled him to his feet. He stood there swaying slightly, looking at her with eyes that had lost all their arrogance. Why? He asked. Why didn't you just tell me who you were? Why go through all of this? Because it shouldn't matter. Sierra released his hand. I shouldn't have to be a Navy SEAL for you to treat people with respect. Mr. Chen shouldn't have to be a war hero for you to keep your hands to yourself. Basic human dignity shouldn't require a resume. Walter Chen was walking toward them. The crowd parted for him. This old man in his maintenance uniform with his bruised face and his trembling hands suddenly commanded more respect than anyone in the room. He stopped in front of Marcus. Mr. Blackwood. Marcus couldn't meet his eyes. Mr. Chen, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Look at me, son. Marcus looked up. Walter's eyes were steady, calm. The eyes of a man who had survived worse than a gym owner's cruelty. I lost my grandson 4 months ago. I found out yesterday. Been writing him letters for months, not knowing he was already in the ground. Walter's voice was quiet, but clear. Miss Hayes came here to tell me. To keep a promise she made to a dying man. And when she saw you hit me, she stepped in. Not because I asked her to. Not because she had to. Because that's what warriors do. He paused. You want to know what real strength looks like? It looks like her. Small and young and written off by everyone who sees her. But willing to stand up for an old man she'd never met because it was the right thing to do. Marcus's eyes were wet. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears that years of practiced toughness couldn't contain. I wanted to be like my father, he said, his voice breaking. He was a firefighter, died saving 2 kids from a burning building. Everyone called him a hero. And I've spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of being his son, but all I've done is become everything he would have hated. Then change, Walter said simply. It's not too late. How, after everything I've done? By starting now, by apologizing, by treating people the way your father would have wanted. Walter placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. I've seen worse men than you become better. The question is whether you want to. Marcus looked around the gym, at the students who had watched him humiliate an old man, and said nothing. At the phones still recording every moment of his breakdown. At his sister Nicole standing by the wall with tears streaming down her face. And at Sierra Hayes, 5'4", 125 pounds. The woman who had just dismantled everything he thought he knew about strength. I'm sorry, Marcus said loud enough for everyone to hear. To Mr. Chen, to everyone I've bullied, to everyone I've hurt. He looked at Sierra. To you, for underestimating you, for thinking I knew what a warrior looked like. He turned to face the crowd. This gym is going to change, starting now. No more intimidation, no more ego. We're going to train like my father would have wanted, to protect people, to serve people, to be worthy of the strength we've been given. The silence stretched. Then Derek Reyes started clapping. 1 person, then 2. Then more. Not everyone joined in. Some of the students looked uncomfortable, uncertain, already planning their excuses for why they'd need to find a new gym. But others were nodding. Others looked relieved, as if they'd been waiting for permission to be something other than what Marcus had demanded. Colonel Diana Reese pushed off from the back wall and walked toward Sierra. The crowd parted for her too, recognizing the bearing of someone who had commanded warriors in places they couldn't imagine. Ghost. Colonel. Well done. I kept my promise. You did more than that. Diana looked at Marcus, at Walter, at the phones, still recording. You changed something here. That's rare. That's worth more than any mission. Sierra shook her head slowly. I just did what Jason would have done. Exactly. Nicole Blackwood approached, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She stopped in front of Sierra and seemed to struggle for words. Thank you, she finally said. I've been trying to reach him for years, to show him what he was becoming, and you did it in one night. He reached himself. I just gave him a reason to look. Still. Nicole glanced at her brother, who was now talking quietly with Walter, his head bowed, his posture transformed from arrogance to something that looked almost like humility. You gave me my brother back. That's not nothing. Take care of him. He's going to need support while he figures out who he wants to be. I will. Sierra turned to leave. She'd done what she came to do. The promise was kept. The fight was won. There was nothing left for her here. But Walter's voice stopped her. Miss Hayes. She turned back. The old Marine was walking toward her, his eyes still wet but his spine straight. He stopped in front of her and did something she didn't expect. He saluted. A crisp, perfect military salute. The kind that came from decades of practice and never quite faded no matter how many years passed. Semper Fi, Lieutenant. Thank you for keeping your promise. Sierra's throat tightened. She returned the salute with the same precision. Semper Fi, sir. It was my honor. When they dropped their hands, something had shifted between them. They weren't strangers anymore. They were bound by something deeper than blood, by sacrifice, by loss, by a young man who had loved them both and died believing they would find each other. What now? Walter asked quietly. Now we plan a memorial. Properly. The way Jason deserves. Together. Together, sir. I'm not leaving you alone. That was the promise. Walter nodded slowly. For the first time since Sierra had met him, something that looked like peace settled across his weathered face. Jason always did know how to pick his friends, he said. He was my best friend, sir. My brother. And I miss him every single day. So do I. Walter's voice cracked. So do I. They stood there in the middle of a gym full of people, two warriors bound by grief and honor, while phones recorded and crowds murmured, and the world continued to turn around them. But for just a moment, none of that mattered. For just a moment, they were exactly where they needed to be, keeping a promise to a man who had given everything so they could stand here together. And that was worth more than any victory. 3 days after the fight, Marcus Blackwood stood in front of Walter Chen's apartment door with a paper bag in his hands and no idea what to say. He'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times, practiced apologies in front of his bathroom mirror until the words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. But standing here staring at the peeling paint and the rusted number 2B, everything he'd prepared vanished. He knocked anyway. Footsteps inside. Slow and careful. The door opened 3 inches, stopped by a chain lock, and Walter's face appeared in the gap. Mr. Blackwood. Mr. Chen, I brought some food. From that Vietnamese place on 5th Street. Marcus held up the bag like an offering. I didn't know what you liked, so I got a few things. Walter stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he undid the chain. Come in. The apartment was small, cramped. The walls were covered with photographs and military memorabilia. Marcus took it all in with new eyes. The young Marine in dress blues from 1975, the group shots from Vietnam, the medals and certificates and flags that represented a lifetime of service. And in the center of it all, a photograph of Jason Chen in his Navy uniform, smiling at the camera, with eyes that looked exactly like his grandfather's. "Sit down," Walter said. "I'll get some plates." Marcus sat at the small table, his massive frame making the furniture look like it belonged in a dollhouse. He watched Walter move around the tiny kitchen, pulling plates from a cabinet, gathering forks and napkins, with the same careful precision that probably characterized everything he did. "I've been thinking," Marcus said quietly, "about what you said. About my father." Walter set a plate in front of him. "What about him? He died when I was 12. House fire. 2 kids trapped on the 2nd floor. He went in without waiting for backup. Got them out. Then the floor collapsed. I'm sorry. Everyone kept telling me he was a hero, that he died doing what he loved, that I should be proud." Marcus stared at his hands. "But all I felt was angry. Angry that he left. Angry that he chose those kids over me. Angry that I had to grow up without a father because he couldn't wait 10 more minutes for the rest of his crew." Walter sat down across from him. "And you've been trying to prove you didn't need him ever since." "How did you know?" "Because I've been their son. Different circumstances, same wound." Walter opened the food containers, releasing the smell of pho and spring rolls. "When I came back from Vietnam, I was so broken I couldn't function. Couldn't hold a job, couldn't be a husband, couldn't be a father. My wife left. My daughter stopped speaking to me, and I spent the next 20 years trying to prove I didn't need anyone." "What changed?" "Jason." Walter's voice softened. "He showed up at my door when he was 18. Said he'd tracked me down through military records. Said he wanted to know his grandfather." A sad smile crossed his face. "I tried to push him away, told him I wasn't worth knowing. But he was stubborn, just like his mother, just like me." "And you reconnected?" "Slowly, painfully, with a lot of mistakes on both sides." Walter picked up his fork, but didn't eat. "The last time we talked, I told him joining the SEALs was a death wish, that the military would use him up and throw him away. I said terrible things, terrible. But he forgave you." "According to Miss Hayes, yes, with his dying breath." Walter's eyes were wet. "I'll never know for sure. I'll never get to hear it from him directly, and I have to live with that." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something he'd never said to anyone. "I don't know who I am without the anger." "Then find out." "How? By doing what your father did. Protecting people, serving people, using your strength to lift others up instead of pushing them down." Walter met his eyes. "You have a gym full of young men who look up to you. What are you teaching them to be bullies or to be warriors?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd never thought about it that way. He'd built ironclad MMA to prove he was tough, to show the world that he didn't need anyone's approval, to fill the void his father had left with trophies and championships and the fear of everyone around him. But what had he actually created? A factory for producing smaller versions of himself. Angry men who confused cruelty with confidence and called it strength. "I want to change," Marcus said, "but I don't know where to start." "Start with the people you've hurt. One apology at a time." Walter finally took a bite of his food. "And then build something your father would have been proud of." "Will you help me?" Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I'll help you, but not as your janitor, as your partner." "Partner," Miss Hayes suggested I might be useful teaching something other than mopping floors. She called it warrior ethics, the mindset behind the training, the code that separates fighters from thugs. You'd do that after everything I did to you. Son, I've spent 50 years carrying anger about things I couldn't change. It almost destroyed me. I'm not interested in carrying more. Walter's voice was firm. You hurt me. You admitted it. Now we move forward. That's how warriors do it. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been locked away for so long he'd forgotten it existed. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard work. Changing a culture is harder than changing yourself. Walter stood and retrieved something from the desk by his bed. He came back holding a worn leather journal. This is my Vietnam diary. Everything I saw, everything I did, everything I felt when I thought I'd never feel again. I want you to read it. Marcus took the journal with trembling hands. Why? Because you need to understand what war really does to people. Not the glory, not the heroism, the truth. Walter sat back down. And because Jason would have wanted me to give you a chance. He believed everyone deserved one. You think he'd have forgiven me for how I treated you. I think he'd have kicked your ass first, then forgiven you. Walter almost smiled. He was like that, hot-tempered, but big-hearted, just like his grandfather used to be. They ate in silence for a while. Two men from different generations, different wars, different wounds, but connected now by something neither of them had expected. Redemption. The word felt foreign to Marcus. He'd spent so long building walls that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer a door instead. Mr. Chen, he said finally, I'd like to attend Jason's memorial, if that's appropriate. Walter set down his fork. I'd like that too. I think he'd have wanted you there. Why, he never met me? No, but he knew people like you. Angry, lost, looking for something to prove. Walter's eyes were distant. He had a way of seeing through the armor, finding the person underneath. Miss Hayes says he saved her life because that's what warriors do. But I think it's simpler than that. He saved her because he saw someone worth saving. And you think he'd have seen something in me? I think you're asking the question. That's a start. Marcus looked down at the journal in his hands. 50 years of pain and survival and hard-won wisdom. A gift from a man he'd slapped across the face 3 days ago. I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves anything, son. We just get what we get and do our best with it. Walter reached across the table and placed his hand on Marcus's arm. The question isn't whether you deserve a second chance. The question is what you're going to do with it. Marcus met the old man's eyes. For the first time since his father died, he felt something other than anger. He felt hope. I'm going to build something worth building, sir. I promise. Then let's get to work. The memorial planning began the next morning. Sierra had transformed Walter's small apartment into a command center. Papers spread across every surface, phone numbers, venue contacts, lists of names that needed to be notified. Fort Bliss has space available 2 weeks from Saturday, she said, tapping her phone. I've already coordinated with the base chaplain. Full military honors. Walter sat at his table holding Jason's dog tags. He'd barely let go of them since Sierra had given them to him. Will his team be there? Everyone who's stateside. Colonel Reese is handling the notifications personally. Sierra paused. There's something else we need to discuss. What? Jason's mother. Your daughter. She needs to know about the memorial. Walter's face went pale. Sarah hasn't spoken to me in 20 years. She's still his mother. She has a right to be there. She blames me. For everything. For the divorce. For not being there when she needed me. For Jason joining the military in the first place. Maybe. But this isn't about old grievances. This is about saying goodbye to her son. Sierra's voice was gentle, but firm. And it's about you. Don't you think it's time to stop running from your family? I'm not running. You've been hiding in a studio apartment working as a janitor for 3 years. You never told Jason where you were living. You never reached out to Sarah. Sierra sat down across from him. That's not survival, sir. That's surrender. The words stung because they were true. I don't know what to say to her. You don't have to say anything. Just show up. Let her know the memorial is happening. Let her decide if she wants to come. And if she doesn't, then at least you tried. At least you stopped hiding. Sierra reached across and took his hand. Jason asked me to take care of you. Part of that means not letting you disappear again. Walter was quiet for a long moment. His thumb traced the raised letters on Jason's dog tags. His grandson's name. His grandson's blood type. Everything the military needed to identify a body. I'll call her, he finally said. Today. Good. But I want you there when I do. Of course, sir. Whatever you need. The phone call happened at 2 in the afternoon. Sierra sat beside Walter on his worn couch while he stared at the number on his phone screen. His daughter's contact information. Sarah Chen Morrison. He'd added it 3 years ago when Jason had given it to him hoping he'd use it. He never had. I can't do this, Walter whispered. Yes, you can. She hates me. Then let her tell you that herself. You've been assuming the worst for 20 years without ever giving her a chance to prove you wrong. Walter's finger hovered over the call button. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. What if she hangs up? Then you call back, or you write a letter, or you show up at her door. Sierra's voice was steady. But you don't give up. Not now. Not after everything. Walter closed his eyes, drew a deep breath, and pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. The voice was older than he remembered, but unmistakable. His daughter. His little girl. The child he'd failed in 1,000 different ways. Sarah, it's your father. Silence. Then, Dad. Yes. I thought you were dead. The words hit like a bullet. No, I'm alive. I'm in Phoenix. Phoenix. What are you doing in Phoenix? Working. Surviving. Walter's voice cracked. Sarah, I'm calling about Jason. More silence. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was thick with suppressed emotion. I know. I got the notification 4 months ago. I should have called you, but I didn't. I didn't know how. I understand. Do you understand what it's like to get that phone call? To hear that your son is dead, and know that his grandfather doesn't even know because you were too proud and too hurt to tell him. Sarah. I wanted to call. 100 times I picked up the phone. But every time I thought about hearing your voice, I remembered everything. The fights, the drinking, Mom crying herself to sleep every night. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. Walter felt tears streaming down his cheeks. He didn't try to wipe them away. I'm sorry, he said, for everything, for not being there, for letting the war destroy our family, for not being the father you deserved. Sarah was crying now, too. He could hear it in her breathing. He loved you, you know, Jason. He talked about you all the time, about tracking you down, about the stories you told him about Vietnam, about wanting to make you proud. I was proud. I was always proud. Did you ever tell him that not enough, not nearly enough? The silence stretched between them, 20 years of distance and pain compressed into a single phone call. I'm planning a memorial, Walter finally said. 2 weeks from Saturday, Fort Bliss. I want you to be there. I want us to say goodbye to him together. Sarah didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. I'll be there. You will. He was my son, Dad. Whatever happened between us, he was still my son. And you're still my father. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending otherwise. Walter couldn't speak. The tears were coming too fast, the emotions too overwhelming. Sierra took the phone gently from his shaking hands. Mrs. Morrison, this is Lieutenant Sierra Hayes. I served with Jason. I was with him when he died. You're the one who found my father. Yes, ma'am. Jason asked me to. Then thank you for keeping your promise, for taking care of him when I couldn't. It's my honor, ma'am. I'll send you the memorial details. And if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will. And Lieutenant, yes, ma'am. Take care of my dad. He acts tough, but he's been broken for a long time. Sierra looked at Walter, who was sitting with his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I will, ma'am. I promise. The call ended. Sierra sat beside Walter and put her arm around his shoulders. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Sometimes the only comfort was presence, the knowledge that you weren't alone. She's coming, Walter finally managed. After 20 years. She's coming. She never stopped loving you, sir. She just forgot how to show it. How do I face her after everything? The same way you faced Vietnam. The same way you faced losing Jason. One step at a time. One breath at a time. Sierra squeezed his shoulder. And not alone, never alone. Not anymore. Walter looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Jason saved your life. Yes, sir. But you're saving mine. Sierra's throat tightened. We save each other. That's what family does. Family. Walter tested the word like it was in a foreign language. I haven't had that in a long time. You have it now. The week before the memorial, Derek Reyes came to see Sierra. She was at Ironclad MMA teaching a women's self-defense class that Marcus had asked her to develop. 30 women of all ages and sizes learning to throw punches and break holds and reclaim their bodies from the fear that the world had taught them. Derek waited until the class ended. Then he approached with the nervous energy of someone about to make a life-changing announcement. Ma'am, I need to talk to you. Derek, what's going on? I made a decision about what you said, about using my experience to help others. He straightened his spine. I'm re-enlisting, Army instructor position at Fort Sam Houston, combat medic training. Sierra smiled. That's great news. I shipped out the day after the memorial. I wanted to thank you for showing me that it's possible. To be broken and still be useful. To have a TBI and still serve. You were never useless, Derek. You just needed someone to remind you of that. You did more than remind me, ma'am. You showed me what a real warrior looks like. Someone who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. Someone who keeps promises even when it costs them everything. I just did what Jason would have done. Then he must have been an incredible man. He was. The best I ever knew. Derek hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin. Army medic insignia on one side, the combat medic prayer on the other. I want you to have this. From one warrior to another. Sierra took the coin, turned it over in her hands. The metal was warm from his body heat. Thank you, Derek. This means more than you know. You saved me, ma'am, whether you realize it or not. You saved me. He saluted. She returned it. Then he turned and walked away, his spine straight, his head high, his future finally visible. Sierra watched him go. One more life changed by a promise to a dying man. One more proof that Jason's sacrifice had meaning beyond the immediate moment. One more reason to believe that keeping promises was worth every ounce of pain it cost. She slipped the challenge coin into her pocket next to Jason's dog tags and went back to teaching women how to fight. The memorial was 3 days away. Walter and Sierra met at the cemetery to review the arrangements. Fort Bliss National Cemetery spread out before them rows of white headstones marking the final resting places of warriors who had given everything. "They found a spot for him," Sierra said quietly, "near some of his Marine brothers. The view overlooks the mountains." Walter nodded slowly. His hands were steady now. The trembling that had plagued him since the day she'd met him had finally stopped. "It's beautiful." He would have liked it. He would have complained about the formality and then secretly been honored. Walter almost smiled. He was like that. Pretended not to care about recognition, but he kept every award, every commendation. Had them displayed in his apartment like trophies. "I know. I helped him hang some of them." They walked among the headstones, reading names and dates, each marker representing a life given in service. So much sacrifice, so much loss. And somehow the country kept going, kept asking its young people to die for causes they might never fully understand. "Did he ever talk about dying?" Walter asked suddenly. "About what he wanted?" Sierra was quiet for a moment. "Once, after a mission that went bad. We lost 2 guys, and Jason had to make a decision that saved the rest of us, but cost him something. I found him sitting alone staring at the stars. What did he say? He said that if he ever died in combat, he wanted people to remember him laughing, not crying over his grave, not turning him into some kind of martyr, just laughing. Because that's how he wanted to live, full of joy, even when everything was falling apart." Walter wiped his eyes. "That sounds like him. I'm going to share that at the memorial, with your permission. I think people need to hear it. I'd like that. I'd like them to know who he really was, not just the SEAL, the man." They reached the spot where Jason would be laid to rest, empty now, waiting for the ceremony that would fill it with meaning. Sierra knelt and touched the grass. "We're almost there, brother," she whispered. "Just a few more days. Then you can rest." Walter knelt beside her. 2 warriors bound by grief and love, and a promise that had brought them here. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For not letting me disappear, for not letting his sacrifice be meaningless, for being the daughter I never had." Sierra looked at him. "And thank you, sir, for being the family I lost when Jason died." They stayed there as the sun began to set, 2 people who had found each other in the wreckage of loss and built something worth having from the ruins. The memorial would come. The tears would fall. The flags would be folded. And somewhere Jason Chen would finally rest, knowing that the people he loved were taking care of each other, just like he'd asked, just like Sierra had promised. The morning of the memorial arrived with a sky so clear it hurt to look at. Sierra stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, adjusting her dress whites. The uniform was crisp and perfect, every crease sharp, every medal aligned. She'd earned each one of them in places the world would never know about, doing things that would never appear in history books. But today wasn't about her. Today was about Jason. She picked up his patrol cap from the desk and held it to her chest. 4 months since Yemen. 4 months since she'd watched him die. 4 months of carrying a promise that had led her here to this moment, to the end of a journey she'd never expected to survive.
"We did it, brother," she whispered. "Your grandfather is okay. Your family is coming back together.
Everything you asked for." The Cap offered no response. It never did. But somehow she felt like he could hear her anyway. A knock at the door. "Ghost, it's time!" Colonel Diana Reese stood in the hallway wearing her own dress whites. 32 years of service reflected in every ribbon, every insignia, every hard-won badge of honor. "You ready?" Diana asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." That's usually how it works. They walked to the car together. The drive to Fort Bliss took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Sierra watched the desert landscape pass by and thought about all the places she'd been, all the missions she'd completed, all the people she'd lost. Jason wasn't the first. He wouldn't be the last. But he was the one who changed everything. "What are you going to say?" Diana asked. "I don't know yet. I'll figure it out when I'm standing there." "That's not like you. You always have a plan. Plans are for missions. This is something else." Sierra paused. "This is goodbye." Diana didn't respond. She understood. Some things couldn't be planned. Some things just had to be felt. Fort Bliss National Cemetery spread out before them as they arrived. Rows upon rows of white headstones perfectly aligned, each one marking a life given in service. Sierra had been to dozens of military funerals, but they never got easier. They weren't supposed to. The memorial site was already prepared, chairs arranged in neat rows. An American flag hung between 2 posts, moving gently in the desert breeze. And at the center of it all, a portrait of Jason Chen, in his Navy uniform, smiling at the camera, with eyes that would never close, that would never age, that would look out at the world forever. Walter stood near the front, wearing a suit that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. His daughter Sarah was beside him, a woman in her 50s, with Jason's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They weren't touching, weren't speaking, but they were standing together. That was a start. Marcus Blackwood arrived with Nicole, both dressed in black. He approached Walter hesitantly, uncertain of his welcome, but Walter reached out and shook his hand. "Thank you for coming, son." "Thank you for letting me, sir." Derek Reyes stood near the back in his army dress uniform, his instructor insignia gleaming. He caught Sierra's eye and nodded. Tomorrow, he would ship out to Fort Sam, Houston. Today, he was here to honor a man he'd never met, but would never forget. Members of SEAL Team 3 began arriving in groups. Men and women who had served with Jason, who had trained with him, who had trusted him with their lives. They greeted Sierra with the quiet respect of warriors recognizing one of their own. Ghost, Hammer, Prophet, Doc. Names, nicknames, the shorthand of people who had seen too much to waste words on formalities. At 1000 hours, the ceremony began. The chaplain spoke first, offering words of comfort that Sierra barely heard. Then the commanding officer of SEAL Team 3 giving the official eulogy that reduced Jason's life to deployments and commendations and the clinical language of military accomplishment. Then, it was Sierra's turn. She walked to the front on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The crowd was larger than she'd expected. 50 people. Maybe more. Friends, family, warriors. All of them watching her, waiting for her to say something that would make sense of a loss that could never make sense. She looked at Jason's portrait, at his smile, at the eyes she'd looked into 1,000 times across training fields and battlefields and quiet moments between chaos. "Jason Chen was my swim buddy," she began. "For those who don't know, that's the most important relationship in SEAL training. Your swim buddy is your partner, your backup, your responsibility. If they fail, you fail. If they quit, you quit. You're bound together from the first day of buds until one of you dies." She paused. "I always thought I'd go first. Jason was better than me. Stronger. Faster. More natural at everything we did. He used to joke that I was the weak link in our chain, that he'd have to carry me across the finish line." A soft laugh rippled through the SEALs in attendance. They knew the dynamic. They'd lived it. But here's what he never understood. The reason I made it through hell, week through buds, through every impossible mission we ever ran, wasn't because I was strong. It was because he wouldn't let me quit. Every time I wanted to give up, he was there, pushing me, challenging me, refusing to accept anything less than my best. Her voice cracked slightly. 4 months ago, in a place I can't name, doing a job I can't describe, Jason stepped into a line of fire that was meant for me. He saw the threat before I did. He moved before I could react. And he died so that I could live. Silence. Absolute and complete. His last words were about his grandfather, about a promise he wanted me to keep. He said, "Find my old man. Tell him I forgive him. Take care of him, Ghost. Promise me." Sierra looked at Walter, who was crying openly, now his daughter's hand finally gripping his. "I made that promise. And I kept it. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm honorable, because Jason believed I could. Because the last thing he saw before he died was my face, and the last thing he asked for was trust." She turned back to the portrait. Jason wanted people to remember him laughing. He told me once that if he ever died in combat, he didn't want tears and speeches. He wanted joy. He wanted people to remember the good times, the jokes, the moments when everything was terrible, and he found a way to make it funny anyway. She smiled through her tears. "So I'm not going to stand here and tell you he was a hero. You already know that. I'm going to tell you that he once convinced our entire team to sing karaoke in a bar in Manila, and he was so terrible that the owner asked us to leave. I'm going to tell you that he cried during romantic comedies and pretended it was allergies. I'm going to tell you that he was the worst poker player I've ever met because he couldn't bluff to save his life." Laughter now. Real laughter. The kind that came from recognition, from shared memories, from love. That's who Jason was. Not just a SEAL, not just a warrior, a human being, flawed and funny and full of life, and the best friend I ever had. She snapped to attention and saluted the portrait. "Rest easy, brother. Your watch is over. We've got it from here." She held the salute for 3 seconds. Then she dropped it, turned, and walked back to her seat. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. The flag was folded. The rifle volleys echoed across the cemetery. Taps played on a bugle, the notes hanging in the air like ghosts that refused to leave. Walter accepted the folded flag with trembling hands. Sarah stood beside him, her arm around his shoulders, tears streaming down her face. When it was over, people began to disperse. But Sierra stayed. She needed a moment alone with him, one last goodbye before she returned to her team, her missions, her life. She knelt beside the headstone they would install tomorrow, traced her fingers across the temporary marker that bore his name. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "Your grandfather has family now. He has purpose. He's going to teach at the gym, help young men understand what real strength means." She placed her hand flat against the grass. "Your mom and grandfather are talking again. 20 years of silence broken because you asked me to find him. You did that, Jason.
Even dead, you're still bringing people together." A shadow fell across her. Sierra looked up. A young woman stood there, maybe 24 or 25, with dark hair and exhausted eyes. She was holding an infant against her chest, wrapped in a blue blanket. The baby was sleeping, one tiny fist clutching the woman's shirt. "Are you Sierra Hayes?" the woman asked. "Yes." "Who are you?" "My name is Lily Tran." The woman's voice was trembling. "I was Jason's wife." Sierra's world tilted. "His wife?" "We got married 6 months before his last deployment. It was quick. We wanted to wait to tell his family until he got back, until we could do it properly." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "He never got back." Sierra slowly stood. Her legs felt weak. Her mind was racing. "He never mentioned. He wanted it to be a surprise. He was going to reconcile with his grandfather first, bring everyone together, then introduce me and—" Lily looked down at the infant in her arms. "And his son?" "His son, James Walter Chen. He's 3 months old." Lily's tears were falling freely now. "Jason never got to meet him. He died 2 weeks before James was born." Sierra stared at the baby, at the tiny face that was somehow impossibly familiar, the shape of the nose, the set of the jaw. Jason's features rendered in miniature, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "Does Walter know?" "No, I've been trying to find him. The notification went to Jason's mother, and she didn't know how to contact his grandfather. I've been searching for months." Lily looked toward the dispersing crowd. "Is he here? Jason's grandfather?" Sierra couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. She just pointed. Walter was standing near the parking lot talking to Sarah, the folded flag still clutched to his chest. He looked old and tired and broken, but there was something different about him now. Something that looked like peace. "Mr. Chen," Sierra called out. Her voice cracked on the words. Walter turned. Sierra walked toward him, Lily following with the baby. Every step felt monumental. Every breath felt like it might be her last. "Mr. Chen," she said again when she reached him. "There's someone you need to meet." Walter looked at Lily, at the baby in her arms. His face was confused, uncertain. "I don't understand," he said. Lily stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Chen, my name is Lily. I was Jason's wife." She lifted the baby slightly, turning him so Walter could see his face. "And this is James, your great-grandson." The words hung in the air. Walter didn't move, didn't speak, didn't seem to breathe. "I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner," Lily continued. "Jason wanted to introduce us properly. He talked about you all the time, about wanting to fix things, about wanting James to know his great-grandfather." Walter's voice was barely a whisper. "My great-grandson." "Yes, sir. James Walter Chen. Jason named him after you." Walter's legs gave out. Sierra caught him before he hit the ground, easing him down to his knees. He was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. 20 years of walls broken by 2 words. Great-grandson. Can I hold him?" Walter asked. Lily knelt beside him and carefully transferred the sleeping infant into his trembling arms. Walter looked down at the tiny face, at the features that were so clearly Jason's, at this impossible miracle that his grandson had left behind. "Hello, James," he whispered. "I'm your great-grandpa. I wish your daddy could see this." Sarah had approached, now her own face wet with tears. She looked at Lily, at the baby, at her father holding a child that represented everything Jason had wanted for his family. "He's beautiful," Sarah said. "He looks just like Jason did," Walter managed. "When he was a baby, the same nose, the same chin." "He has his eyes, too," Lily said. "When they're open, that same intensity." Walter looked up at Sierra, his eyes shining. "You knew," he said, "when you made your promise. You didn't know about Lily or James, but you kept it anyway. And now you have family," Sierra said, "more than you ever knew." She stepped back, watching the scene unfold. Walter holding his great-grandson. Sarah embracing Lily, welcoming her into a family that was rebuilding itself from the ashes. Marcus and Nicole standing nearby, bearing witness to something they would carry with them forever. Colonel Diana Reese appeared at Sierra's side. "You did this," Diana said quietly. "All of this." "No, Jason did this. I just kept his promise." "Same thing in the end." Sierra looked at the headstone one more time. At Jason's name, soon to be carved in stone. At the legacy he had left behind. "He saved me, Colonel. Not just in Yemen. Every day since. He saved me from giving up, from disappearing, from becoming just another operator who did her job and felt nothing. What now? Now I go back, to the team, to the work. But I'll visit. I'll watch James grow up. I'll make sure he knows who his father was." Another promise, the last one. "After this, I think I'm done making promises I might not be able to keep." Diana smiled slightly. "That's not true, and you know it. You'll keep making promises until the day you die." "That's who you are, Ghost. That's what makes you one of us." Sierra didn't argue. She knew Diana was right. The crowd had finally dispersed. Only the family remained. Walter was still holding James, but he was standing now, Sarah and Lily, on either side of him. Marcus lingered nearby, uncertain if he should leave or stay. Sierra walked over to them. "I have to go," she said. Walter looked up. His eyes were still wet, but there was something in them now that hadn't been there before. Joy. Real joy. "Thank you, Lieutenant Hayes, for everything. For keeping your promise. For not giving up on an old man who had given up on himself. Thank you, sir. For raising the man who saved my life. For being worth saving." She knelt down and looked at James, at this tiny person who represented everything Jason had hoped for. "Hey, little man," she whispered. "Your daddy was a hero. The best I ever knew. And someday when you're old enough, I'm going to tell you all about him. Every story, every joke, every moment that made him who he was." She stood and faced Walter one last time. "Semper Fi, sir." "Semper Fi, Lieutenant." She saluted. He returned it with the hand that wasn't holding his great-grandson. A crisp, perfect military salute that bridged 50 years of service and connected two warriors who had found each other in the wreckage of loss. Then Sierra turned and walked away. Her boots crunched against the gravel path that led to the parking lot. Behind her, she could hear Lily asking Walter about Jason's childhood, Sarah offering to help with the baby, Marcus suggesting that James should take his first martial arts class at Ironclad when he was old enough. The circle wasn't just complete, it was expanding. Diana fell into step beside her. "You know you changed more than just Walter's life," she said. "Marcus is different. Derek found purpose. Lily found family. And that baby is going to grow up knowing exactly who his father was because you made sure of it. Jason did that, not me. You keep saying that. Because it's true." They reached the car. Sierra paused her hand on the door and looked back at the cemetery one last time. The family was still gathered around Jason's grave. Walter was pointing at something on the horizon, showing James the mountains, narrating a world that the infant was too young to understand, but would someday inherit. "Colonel," Sierra said. "Yes." "Do you think he knows Jason? Do you think he can see this?" Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think the dead live on in the people they leave behind, in the promises we keep, in the lives we change because they changed us first." "That's not really an answer." "No, but it's the best I've got." Sierra nodded slowly. She opened the car door, paused, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the challenge coin Derek had given her. "Hold on to this for me," she said, pressing it into Diana's hand. "Give it to James when he's old enough to understand what it means." "What does it mean?" "It means someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now I'm passing that on." Sierra climbed into the car. "Tell him his Aunt Sierra will be watching. From wherever she is, whatever she's doing, she'll always be watching." Diana took the coin. "I'll tell him. And Colonel, yes. Thank you for everything, for pulling me out of that foster home, for showing me I could be something, for being the mother I never had." Diana's eyes glistened. "You were always something, Ghost. You just needed someone to see it." The car started. The engine rumbled to life. Sierra took one last look at the family gathered around Jason's grave, at the legacy of a man who had given everything so that others could have more. Then she drove away. The desert stretched out before her, endless and unforgiving, full of dangers that most people would never know existed. Somewhere out there another mission was waiting, another promise to be made, another life to be saved or taken or transformed. But for now, in this moment, Sierra Hayes allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt since Yemen. Peace. Not because the pain was gone. It would never be completely gone. But because the promise was kept. Because Jason's sacrifice had meaning. Because an old man had found family, a broken gym owner had found purpose, and a baby named James would grow up knowing that his father was a hero. That was worth everything. That was worth the pain and the loss and the endless nights spent wondering why she'd survived when Jason hadn't. Because surviving meant continuing. It meant carrying forward the legacy of those who'd fallen. It meant becoming the living monument to their sacrifice. Sierra Hayes was a Navy SEAL, a warrior, a keeper of promises, and as long as she drew breath, Jason Chen would never be forgotten. His story would be told to every new recruit, every struggling trainee, every person who thought about giving up. The man who stepped into fire so others could live. The man who used his dying breath to ask for forgiveness and trust and love. The man who taught her that real strength isn't about dominance. It's about protection. It's about sacrifice. It's about keeping promises even when keeping them costs you everything. Sierra drove toward the horizon, toward whatever came next, carrying the weight of memory and the lightness of purpose. Behind her, Jason's family began building a future from the ruins of their past. And somewhere in whatever place warriors go when their watch is finally over, Jason Chen smiled. His promise was kept, his legacy was secure, and the people he loved were finally taking care of each other. That was all he'd ever wanted. That was enough.